If you haven't already, please open up your notes to graphing equations. That's what we're going to be talking about today. In last unit, we talked about situations and how we can represent a situation with a graph, a table, or an equation. In this unit, we're going to be talking about the same thing, but we're going to be doing it more with numbers, and we're going to be looking at how we can start from the numbers instead of a word problem or a situation. So, we're going to start out by talking about a word called slope. You already know what this means, you just haven't heard this word before. Slope is the change between points on a table, graph, or in an equation. We've been talking about change for a while, but now we're learning that that's actually called the slope. When we're graphing, it tells us how to move. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Slope is usually written as a fraction, which is important to know. Even if the slope is something like 3, you need to write it as a fraction, so you would write it as 3 over 1, because that's how you write a whole number as a fraction. The reason why we write it as a fraction is the numerator and the denominator, so the top and the bottom have meanings. The top tells us about the rise, or how much we go up. The bottom, the denominator, tells us about the run, how much we go to the right. So it's telling us rise and run. So we have been calling it the change. We just learned that we can call it the slope, but it's also called the constant of proportionality. So another word for slope or change is the constant of proportionality. It tells us how much is it changing each time. So an example would be like Henri could run 5 meters per second. 5 would be the constant of proportionality. Okay? We also have talked about the y-intercept before. The y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. When we're graphing, it tells us where to start. We're going to draw a little picture. So this is our coordinates, and then we draw a line. Our y-intercept is here, where it crosses the y-axis. So where it's touching the y-axis, we want to make sure we label them y and x. Remember, the y-axis is the one that goes up and down. The x goes side to side. Then we have this equation that we've seen before. Y equals mx plus b. We worked on using this equation to model a situation last unit. In this unit, we're going to use this to do tables and graphs. It's actually called slope-intercept form, and the reason why is m represents the slope, and b represents the y-intercept. So it tells us right in the equation what's the slope and the y-intercept. You don't have to find them, you just find them in the equation. The slope we've been calling the change, so if that helps you, you can label it change. The y-intercept we've been calling the start, so if that helps you, you can label it start. Now we're going to look at how we can take all this information and actually make a graph. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, it's a little bit blurry up here, but you should be able to see it on your paper. So in this first equation, our slope is 2/3. I found that because if we look at our equation, the slope is with the x, 2/3 is with the x. Our y-intercept is 4, because it says plus the y-intercept, so it's 4. We're going to label our axes. We have y and x. When we're graphing, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the y-intercept. So we're going to go onto our y-axis and find 4. So we're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to put a dot. We always start counting from the center, which is called the origin. So I went up 1, 2, 3, 4, and put a dot on my y-axis. Now my slope tells me rise over run. So what this is telling me is go up 2 squares, 1, 2, and then over 3, 1, 2, 3. And that's where my next point goes. I put the loops so that you could see how I got there. I went up 2, over 3. But once you get better at graphing, you're not going to put the loops. You're just going to count up 1, 2, over 1, 2, 3, and put a dot. Once you have 3 dots, you're going to use something straight to connect them and make a line. And we'll put arrows on the ends of our line because we could have kept going up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3 forever. But we're not going to do that right now, so we'll just leave it like that. On our second example, we're going to start by labeling our axes again. Y, x. And we're going to find our slope and our y-intercept. Our slope is with the x, so the number in front of x is negative 1 over 4. We're going to put the negative in the numerator, and we'll talk about y in just a minute. Then our y-intercept. Our y-intercept, we have a 3, but normally it's supposed to say plus b. This time it says minus b, so we'll show the y-intercept as a negative. So we looked at our equation, we found the slope and the y-intercept. The y-intercept tells us where to start, so we're going to start at negative 3. So I go to the middle, count down 1, 2, 3. That's my first point. Now, in my slope, it's normally rise over run. But since the 1 is a negative, instead of going up, the opposite would be going down. Because it's a negative, we're going to go down instead of up. And then 4 is positive, so we're going to go to the right. That's why it's important that you put the negative in one of the numbers, not both. It's important you put the 1 for one of the numbers, not both. So now we start at negative 3, and our slope tells us go down 1, and then right 4. So I go down 1, right 1, 2, 3, 4, and I put my next dot. I continue from this dot, go down 1, right 1, 2, 3, 4, and put a dot. On Desmos today, once you get the dots in the right spot, you'll know because a line will pop up. If the line doesn't pop up, you need to make sure to double check your points. It's also important that you put the colors in the right order. So You can double check the colors. Please make sure you ask for help if you get stuck. I hope this lesson goes well, and I'll see you when I come back. Have a good day. Bye.